Welcome to the Nurse Life Coach Academy podcast, where Laura
and Shelby, both board-certified nurse coaches, talk all about how to get certified and practice professionally as a nurse life coach.
All right, welcome to the Successful Nurse Coach podcast, Nurse Life Coach edition, because we're going to talk about a topic that is really skill building and also incredible if you are building a private practice. So this is a twofer. And the reason why I decided on this topic is because I was just recently sick. I got some kind of bug that my kids got after they'd already had it, and then ended up with a secondary infection and needed to take steroids for it and antibiotics. And so for about 2 weeks, I was under the weather, which actually is probably the longest that I've felt bad in the last 5 years. It was like the least functional I was in the last 5 years. And then post-virus and having to take medications and how prednisone makes you feel, I really came out of that 2 weeks with like no motivation. And very similar to a feeling of burnout. And when you're a professional coach, this is especially scary, right? Because when we think of hiring a professional coach or working on our business, or me as the co-founder of a certification, I have students that I'm going to graduate this week. Like, what happens when I lose all motivation, and how does that look? And it can get really dark and twisty. And so it's really born from what I'm currently experiencing. And I know this is going to resonate with so many of you. So today's topic is called the myth of motivation. And I want to just untease some truths about what motivation is, what it isn't, how we work with it with our clients, but more importantly, how do we behave in our own life with or without it? And I think that as you become a professional nurse life coach, you're becoming a coach, but you're also becoming an entrepreneur. And as an entrepreneur, I can tell you with 100% certainty that you will have to work many a days that you don't feel motivated. And that, in fact, in some ways, you have to develop the skill at a way higher level than you ever had to as a bedside nurse or as a W-2 worker, because everything has to be intrinsic. It can't be extrinsic, meaning that if you are not working for somebody else, then there are no consequences if you don't come to work. And so we have to develop these other ways of interacting with motivation in our own practices. So one of the myths that I experienced early on was this idea, and also as a human being with ADHD, that I had to feel motivated before I took action. And so most of my young adult life, I waited for a feeling to appear so that I could. And I'll give you some examples. I would have many, many, many a days in my 20s where I could not go to work. I could not do anything. It was absolute a freeze response. And I would call in sick to work and just lay in bed all day. And essentially, I'd be trying to minimize all of the things around me that were excitatory to my nervous system. Really, my nervous system was so taxed and so overwhelmed that I needed a day to recoup. And what this did for me is it made me think that there was something deeply wrong with me, that I couldn't do what other people did. My friends would say, we don't know if Laura's going to come until the day that she comes, because it would matter how I felt that morning, whether I could attend or not. And by the way, there was no mindset around this. There's no mindset or way of being that could have kept me from staying home. The only way would have been to have a much more healthy, regulated nervous system, to understand myself better, to take care of myself better, to realize I am not like everybody else. It wasn't until I could really honor that this stopped happening. And so I have this really painful lived experience of waking up without quote unquote motivation, not being able to execute, not being able to be my word, and then feeling guilty and shame. And it was just this cycle that I went through for years. And so if that's you, as you're listening to this, I also want to say that when your nervous system is perpetually in the red, that it's very difficult to have motivation on demand or to take action without it. So I want to tease that apart. Also, mental health. If you're suffering from severe anxiety and depression, this is likely not the right podcast for this particular moment of your journey. There's probably a better message. But if this is not you, if you're reasonably functional and you're concerned about your ability to start a business or to do this thing or to help your clients do something, then this is a better podcast for you. All right. So we know that action is what creates motivation. Motivation does not precede action. Motivation is a wonderful feeling. I am sure that the neurotransmitters that are released into our bodies during motivation are amazing. Like, I'd love to test that. And we're all different neuro-wise, we're all different biochemically. And so your version of feeling motivated feels one way, my version of feeling motivated feels one way, but I think we can all agree we like when it happens. It's a good feeling. It is a feeling of momentum. It is a feeling of certainty. It's a feeling of, I can do this. I will do this. I can do anything. And in fact, for Shelby and I, this is often when we're feeling really motivated. This is where we say, oh, let's try this thing. It can't be that hard. And we get ourselves in over our head over and over again. It's a wonderful thing, but it is not something you can rely on. And so one of our mentors says, you don't fail to your feelings, you fail to your systems. And so you need to have a system that does not rely on a feeling, because feelings are fleeting. They come and go. And so when we wait for motivation, it keeps us stuck. And the neuroscience of dopamine and progress says that when we make progress, when we have a to-do list and we make a check on our little to-do list, when we end something, when we finish a task, we get rushes of dopamine. So there is a reward center to take action. But oftentimes we have to take a lot of action before we get the reward. And many, many, many of our clients are going to hire us because they can't get themselves to do something that they want to do, or they have something that they want to change that they have not been successful changing. And oftentimes it is tied into this myth that they have to feel motivated. And oftentimes, as the coach, this might be the first time that they understand this concept. So what would you do with a client? I would ask them about what makes you motivated. When have you felt the most motivated? When have you felt the least motivated? Tell me what that internal experience is like. Do you have any shame around not being motivated? Just get curious of what their lived experience is and normalize it. That, like, hey, in this 3 months we're working together, there are going to be days you may not even want to come to your coaching call. There might be days where you feel like this is a big waste of money and you're not even attached to the goal that we're talking about today. All of that's normal. And that's the beauty of having me, is I'm going to remind you of what your stated goal is. And I'm going to believe in you. And when you don't feel like doing it, or when you're quote unquote failing, I'm going to be right there right with you. And then over time, 3 to 6 months, we will have a new way of being installed, and you'll have it for the rest of your life. You will become the kind of person that can do what they say. You will become the kind of person who believes that if you have a set goal, that you will accomplish it, even if you've never been successful up until this point in your life. So it's incredibly powerful to talk about this. But we know we can't take our clients any deeper than we've gone ourselves. And so I know that as a professional coach, the first few times that I felt really unmotivated, specifically in private practice before I had a partner. By the way, having a partner is an extrinsic motivator. I'm very grateful for my partner. We motivate each other. We have to show up when the other person doesn't want to. And so I just want to acknowledge that I have that built in and it works best for me. But as a solopreneur, I still had to do the thing, right? So if you're a solopreneur thinking, gosh, I just can't do this alone, you can. Maybe don't do it alone forever, but all coaching practices start out, for the most part, alone. And I was alone in my private practice for 2.5, 3 years before I went full partnership with Shelby. So I've been here, I've done this. I'm not speaking from a place of not being able to do it. I think because of the nature of our work, if we're not feeling motivated, if we're not hitting our own personal goals, or we're failing in any part of our life, that it can feel like we're out of integrity when we're helping another human being. And I want to dispel that, because signing up to be a professional nurse life coach does not mean that you will not struggle with execution and with taking action without motivation. You're human. Of course you will. The benefit of having this profession is we are sitting with it, when we're being with it, and we have resources around us and hopefully our own coach or our own colleague that we can reach out to and explore it. But this idea that you're never going to have to take action before you feel motivated as a professional coach is, quite frankly, a fairy tale. Um, right now, I'm recording at 7:37 a.m. My kids are out of school today. I needed to get this done. And I was on my couch drinking coffee and I thought, goodness, I have to get my podcast recorded. I better get out into the office early. And it's a podcast day, so I have to do my homework. I have to do my makeup. So I'm on video talking to you. I didn't want to do that 45 minutes ago. But as soon as I got up and got into my bathroom and got dressed, within 8 to 10 minutes, then I started thinking about this podcast, about the topic of it. Motivation followed. It followed about 8 minutes after I got up off the couch and came into work early. And I've done that so many times that I know I can count on the feelings to happen. And so my brain does not have a problem starting something before I feel like it, because I've already done it so many times that I know that at some point, whether it be right now, whether it be 8 hours from now, or maybe 8 months from now, that eventually the action will create a feeling that is more enjoyable than the feeling that I had before I wanted to do it. And I think what we're all really looking for is sustainable motivation. We want something sustainable. What I love about a professional nurse life coach practice is that even if there's parts of it you don't want to do and parts of it that are difficult, the overall alignment of helping human beings, it pulls us through because it's like part of what we're supposed to do on this planet. So alignment, and I'm going to define that as your goals and your actions are oriented in a direction that feels like is aligned with what your purpose is, your bigger purpose, your higher purpose. And the goal with a career is to feel like you never work a day in your life. And I'm telling you right now, that is possible. It is possible to create something that, even though you don't feel like you want to do it and it's totally aligned, that you still feel like you're not working a day in your life because you're connected to something greater. Many of the nurses that I speak to each week, you are working inside of a system in a role where you do not feel aligned for whatever purposes. Maybe you're more holistic. Maybe you don't believe in all of the medications and the policies and the procedures that you have to do inside of your organization. Maybe you feel like a cog in a corporate wheel that's for profit. There are these things that haunt you. There's this sense of being out of alignment. It is difficult to stay motivated when you are out of alignment. It's difficult. It's because part of sustainable motivation comes from alignment. And for many people that I speak to, I hear this story of, I wish I could just be like a normal person and just go to clock in, clock out, do some fun stuff on the weekends, have a few vacations a year and be satisfied, because you look around and you see other people that seemingly are satisfied and you are not. There's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with you if you are not. Oftentimes, if this is you, you change jobs a lot, you change specialties a lot. So the way that you deal with being out of alignment is just constant variety. As long as you're in some version of variety and learning, then you can connect, like you can get the feeling of motivation because you're growing. But as soon as you, quote unquote, stop growing in your role, or you've learned everything that you can learn, or you've ascended as high as you can go, this is where you start thinking about your master's or your doctorate or changing specialties or changing jobs. And I love when I talk to nurses who have this personality, because you are likely going to do well as an entrepreneur. Because as an entrepreneur, it's all variety. There's a lot of things you have to do that are boring too and repetitive, but there is variety and you are in charge of the variety. And so you are, quote unquote, changing specialties and growing all the time. You cannot ascend higher than you want to go. I mean, there's no ceiling here. You want a $100,000 practice? You got it. You want a $500,000 practice? You got it. Shelby and I would love, love, love for Nurse Life Coach Academy and the Successful Nurse brand to hit 10 million a year. That's our goal. We want to do that. Primarily because if we hit 10 million a year, it means that we're like really in our purpose. Like we're making a big change to healthcare, not a little one. So for us, that financial, the quote unquote goal or ceiling or thing that we speak into existence, it's really attached to how much purpose that we can create in the world. And then there's the added benefit of being paid for the value that you bring. So entrepreneurship is filled with ceilingless ways to connect to your purpose, which I love. And if you are currently in a W-2 job and you don't feel aligned, and I talk to all of you all week long, acknowledge that. Acknowledge that it is likely you're just slightly out of alignment. And oftentimes, a part-time private practice, 2 clients at a time, $3,000 a month. Let's say that you create a part-time private practice. It's $36,000 a year. You always have 1 to 3 clients all the time. A lot of times that can breathe so much motivation and alignment into you that you don't mind your W-2 job. In fact, you might fall back in love with your W-2 job because you're getting some of your needs met outside of it, and that part of your work or your professional life is in alignment. And the more we come face to face with our own limitations around motivation and action, the more that we, I don't want to say overcome, I want to say grow into this version of ourselves that can be their word, who can look at something that's seemingly impossible and take steps each day towards it, even if there's no dopamine. The more we can become that version of ourselves in our own practice, the easier it is for us to inspire others to do the same. So, I'm doing this podcast right now. I'm not sure how many nurses are going to be listening to it. What I can say is that you can sense through my energy and my voice that I have overcome some of these things, and it is being transmitted to you like a vibration in an esoteric way that it's possible for you too. And this gives you more energy to do these actions without the feeling. You're plugged into extrinsic motivation right now by listening to this, because I am telling you that on the other side of taking action when you don't feel like it is extraordinary outcomes. And it is important to be in alignment with your high goal, with your high dream. It's important to get connected to that. It's important to give voice to that. We were on a call yesterday with an organization that we're going to partner with to bring Nurse Life Coach Academy. We're going to white label Nurse Life Coach Academy, bring it to their hospital, create their own in-house certification program so that from a finances perspective, the organization can keep creating coaches every year without the expense of farming it out to an external certification. And we're really honored to do that. And even on that call yesterday, I was in a room of 8 leaders, nurse leaders in a large organization. I started speaking it into existence. I said, we want to help you create a successful in-house certification program and department, because I want you guys to be the first model so that other organizations can follow what you've done. And I just speak it into existence. This is probably going to be an 18-month goal that costs me money to participate in, by the way. What I'm doing with this organization and what Shelby and I are doing with different organizations is we're not making a bunch of money. It'll be mostly work and mostly struggle for a long time, with the potential for a high dream to be realized through bringing nurse coaching to organizations. So I'm doing what you're doing. I've been doing what you're doing. We can do it together. We really can. And what I love about realizing that motivation's not required is that the feelings of just not wanting to do something, or that feeling of being so burnt out, we can honor it, and we can also know that it won't get in the way because we know how to work with it, and we have deep self-trust that we work with it. And then the feelings don't matter as much because we've trained our brain to say, just do it. Just get up and record the podcast at 7:30 in the morning, because by the time that you sit down and you start talking, you're going to feel great. And I feel great here talking to you guys. So we want to create that positive feedback loop. I want to talk a little bit about extrinsic versus intrinsic. Intrinsic motivation comes from inside of us. It is self-directed, self-created. Extrinsic is the outside rewards. And so some of the best forms of extrinsic motivation is competition, is status, of the longing for other people to see us as something that positive, looking like we're a success, earning money. Money is an extrinsic motivator. Extrinsic motivators are fantastic. But what I think you can sense if you've been doing this for any amount of time is that we need intrinsic and extrinsic. We can't rely solely on extrinsic. A coach helps us extrinsically. We invest time and money into said goal. As soon as we make that payment to our coach, we're in extrinsic motivation. We've already made a commitment. We've had the pain of parting with our hard-earned W-2 money for said goal. That's extrinsic motivation. We are working with other human beings to create extrinsic motivation through hiring us to get their goal. There's nothing wrong with extrinsic. But ideally, for sustainable motivation, we have to have some intrinsic qualities to the way that we move in the world. And there's an exercise in the academy where we talk about asking the 5 whys. Somebody says, I really want to start an art business in my city. And so the coach would say, well, why? Well, because I really love art and I want to do something that I'm passionate about. Well, why? Well, because I want my kids to observe their mom, like following her passion. And I've been talking about it and thinking about it for years and I've just been too scared. Well, why? Well, because what if I fail? So sometimes saying 5 whys to somebody's high dream is very revealing and informing of what you're working with. And we want to connect our goals to the deeper why. And so in that little exercise that I did with this theoretical person who wants to start an art company in their town, is one of our extrinsic motivators is status. She wants her children to watch her go after her dream. She wants her actions to impact her children in a positive way. That's a lot deeper than I just want to make a little extra money. So uncovering those deeper whys, finding that thread of alignment towards the big high goal is oftentimes the only thing that you have to take action from, that you don't have any extrinsic motivation that day. And we learn in the academy a lot about stages of change, and everybody's in some stage of change. And we know that nurse life coaches, we work best when we're in contemplation or higher. So pre-contemplation, it's difficult to coach somebody in. They're just not ready. And so oftentimes when you're struggling with your own motivation, just check and see what stage of change that you're in. I think that understanding the human experience, understanding how our brain works, understanding what thoughts create what feelings can be so helpful when we're back engineering our own reality. And oftentimes, motivation can get you started. So we talked about like the wave of the feeling. And motivation can come from listening to a podcast. It can come from a coaching session. It can come from watching somebody else do something that's inspiring. It can come from a loving encouragement that your partner whispers to you on a Saturday morning. So if you have a wave of motivation, ride it because it's such a gift. And sometimes I do this with my physical fitness and my weight journey. I know that if I can wait for a wave of motivation and I can get into a rhythm on that wave of motivation, that I can use discipline to get through the first 3 weeks and then I'm good. So oftentimes for things that are particularly difficult for human beings, it's really you only have to use discipline over motivation for like 21 days. And then after 21 days, you've got a scaffolding, a system that will carry you further. And so that's another great mindset trick is, hey, I'm going to do what I don't want to do for 21 days, but I know that at 21 days, something magical starts to happen. It becomes a habit. I don't have to work so hard. It doesn't take so much energy. And I've installed a new framework into my life and into my behavior. Anybody can do anything for 21 days, right? I love that you can use motivation to start and you can use discipline to continue until neither are required. Now, how do we as nurse life coaches help our clients do this? Well, sometimes it's just through a conversation about the human experience. It's talking about the stages of change and then asking them questions so they can self-identify where they are. It's asking them questions about when you've tried this in the past and it hasn't worked. Tell me about that. What were some of the thoughts that you had? What do you think were some of the pitfalls? Like what knocked you off track? How did you feel when you got knocked off track? And how do you see yourself as it relates to this thing, this goal? That's so helpful. So it's just sharing their internal experience with another human being. It's evaluating where they are. And then it's talking about extrinsic and intrinsic motivation and saying, hey, change takes time to install, to become a habit. And we're going to look at the next 21 days. So for 3 weeks. So we really only have to have the motivation to make the commitment. And then we have to have the discipline to do it for 21 days, no matter what. Tell me in your own words for the next 21 days, if you were going to fail, what are the top 5 ways that you'd fail? oh, my kid would get sick, or we have this work event and I know that there's going to be alcohol and food there and that's going to be tricky, and whatever their goal is, identifying all the spots where they would likely fall off and then creating strategies for each of those and two-way communication in the meantime. So essentially saying, hey, for the next 21 days, I'm in this with you. So anytime that you feel like you're going to fall off, or you can sense that this would be a time where you would normally fall off, you are to message me. I'm going to make notes. We're going to study you for this next 21 days. And we're going to learn. And we have so many tricks up our sleeve that you're going to be successful. And it's going to feel so good. And let's connect you to your why, because motivation gets you started and discipline and environment keep you going. Systems keep you going. I'll give you some systems in private practice that I have. When I start feeling a lot of dread about work, or maybe we're in the middle of a project or something's not going well, I'll give you an example. We just went through a launch and our phone system kept glitching and we were losing our phone lines. And so we would be texting potential students, we'd be texting you guys, and the phone would go dead and we'd have to get a new phone line. We'd have to text you from another phone number. And this was happening like a lot. And it's just a tech glitch. Our launch did not do as well as we had projected because of that glitch, something out of our control. And yet we still had to work, 10 hours a day for 20 days straight. Me and Shelby did, because of the stage that we are at in business. And so whenever I go through any sustained period of time where I'm relying on discipline so much, I give myself permission to rearrange my office. Because silly as it sounds, order, beauty, and getting to marvel at the space in my office that I've created and making something new, moving a light, moving a picture, moving the angle of my desk, a new candle, maybe going and buying a few new things. If I can spend an hour or two on my environment, I look forward to walking into my office. I get a win when I come to work, even if it's a 10-hour day with tech glitches. That's just, for me, like a really silly, easy strategy that I can rely on. I know for some, it's like deciding to get dressed nicer that day. Sometimes kind of like, spiffing up your inside of your office, deciding to go the extra mile and to wear something that's nicer, or to do your makeup or your hair, or to spend more time on your appearance, that can make you have some motivation. There's like something that changes. You're dressing for success. Oftentimes it's treating yourself to something that you enjoy doing. And for me, it could be going shopping at Ross and buying something that I don't need. It could be walking around the property. It could be spending more time with the animals than normal, but sometimes acknowledging that you're using a lot of discipline and rewarding yourself with something that gives you a little bit of dopamine can be a strategy. And then, of course, telling my husband, like, I am struggling mentally. This is really hard. And just having him listen and acknowledge that it's hard so that somebody else knows how hard it is to be Laura Menard in that moment, that helps. One that is not great that I'm working on, and Shelby, if you're listening to this, I get really frustrated and bitchy and I get stressed and I'm not fun to be around. And so I try not to do that. But in some ways that releases some of the negative. It relieves me enough that I can keep going. This is like the toxic when you just dump all over somebody else. And this happens at work, right? So I think that nurses specifically, a lot of times we can commiserate over how horrible our job is, or the system is, or our manager is, or this thing is, and oftentimes we can get in this habit of just complaining as a coping mechanism. So I want to tease that out, that there's probably higher ways to stay in discipline and stay motivated than to do that. But also it can be really nice with a professional coach when a coach says, hey, for 10 minutes, just complain. I don't no judgment, just all the thoughts, the feelings, the thoughts, your ego's kicking and screaming, just complain. I will be just dump all over me as an exercise of relief, as an exercise of moving through and towards. That can be incredibly helpful too. All right. So I want to play devil's advocate here, because I want to go back to the version of me that could not do what I needed to do because I didn't have motivation. The first thought error that I had installed is that, and I watched my father do this. So my father is very cyclical. like very motivated, unmotivated, like very, I don't know if there would be like a diagnosis, but very manic, depressed, high, low, different versions. Okay. So I lived in a house with unstable feelings, like emotional home, and then a mom who would try to fix that. So my dad would set the emotional temperature. My mom would acquiesce to whatever that temperature was. And so my model growing up was that feelings are really important. And I wanted to chase the good feelings and run away from the bad feelings. 'Cause when you're in the bad feelings, all these things happen. And when you're in the good feelings, all these good things happen. And so they were very polarizing for me. And it's probably why I started using drugs and partying, is because I was chasing feelings. And so I just want to also acknowledge that the way that we grow up, the people that we've seen, the trauma that we've experienced, a lot of this lays our programming and our thought errors. So the first thing I want to say is that success does not require motivation, and success is not created on feelings. Feelings are secondary. The game that you have to play for anything that you want in life is, how do you consistently take action even if you don't feel like it? What system can you create intrinsically that allows you to take action no matter what? And I don't mean gaslighting yourself. I mean in the deepest form of self-love and devotion. I don't mean pushing past burnout or pushing past what you're capable of. I mean in the deepest way of loving ourselves, of creating your own internal system so that you can't betray yourself. And I think it starts with the belief that my feelings don't matter. Feelings are something I don't have control over for the most part. I have control over my actions, and I have control over what thoughts that I choose. And my actions and my thoughts impact my feelings. That's like a very fundamental belief that I had to create. And if you're listening to this, I really want you to examine that. If you have control over moving your body and taking action, and you have control over what thoughts you have through examination and intention, then in some ways we do have control over our feelings. And feelings they take off the manager hat. Younger Laura, feelings were the boss. Feelings were the boss of my dad. Feelings were the boss of me. Feelings were the boss of my house. Feelings were the most important thing that would determine the type of day or week or month that we were going to have. And so I was very in my feelings. I identified feelings at the top of the pyramid, and that's a very disempowering and difficult and painful way to exist. I watched this with my daughter. And so actions and thoughts probably being the first one that you would start with. Thoughts we do have control over. The first step is identifying what thoughts that you have the most regularly, like slowing down enough through a mindfulness or an embodiment practice so that you can start teasing out the rapid amount of thoughts that you have each day, writing them down, sharing them with somebody, identifying where they come from, identifying which ones are helpful, which ones are not helpful, creating new thoughts and a system to begin thinking them more often. That's incredibly powerful. We are not a victim when we promote thoughts and action over feelings. When feelings are over thoughts and action, it can be incredibly difficult. And sometimes with mental health, with trauma, with things that happen in our life, we're not able to do that. But that is the goal. That is the posture that we are oriented towards. As the professional nurse life coach, this is the way that your life needs to be oriented. The more that you master yourself, the more effective you will be with your clients. The more that you identify your own weaknesses and challenges and overcome them, the more confident you'll become. The more confident you become in your own ability to change, the more confident you become in your client's ability to change, and it makes you a better coach. And it'll make you a more successful coach. And by the way, it'll make you a better feeling coach. You'll have more positive feelings. You'll likely have more motivation. All right. So I think that some tangible tips could be helpful here. Focusing on daily habits, which is more empowering than chasing a feeling. A wonderful book for this is Atomic Habits by James Clear. Probably the most well-written book on the power of habit. I love one of his stories that he tells is that when you are changing something in your life, it's kind of like an ice cube in a room. And if the room is 30 degrees and you do so much work inside of the room to raise the temperature to 31 degrees, nothing has still happened. There's nothing extrinsic or visible that you can see. Just, it's a bunch of work. And then you hit 32 degrees, still nothing. But then when you hit 33 degrees, you start to see the ice cube melt. And that's where you start to get the tangible results of the work that you're doing. If private practice is a goal of yours, you're going to have to get really, really comfortable with hard work over long periods of time that are seemingly boring and seemingly not working until you can see something happen. I would say minimum of 4 to 8 months, you have to have that in the bank. The ability to do something for 4 to 8 months with no proof that it's going to work and not stopping. That's gold standard for successful practice. So as I'm talking about motivation, it's like a requirement to create the practice that you want to have. And by mastering it and going for it and having your first ice cube melt in a big way will empower all of your clients to do the same. So it's worth mastering. All right, guys, this was a podcast that was passion driven, not structured. So I apologize if I'm all over the place. But what I would love, if you're listening to this and you haven't subscribed or liked our podcast, please do that. We are going to be pouring more resources and content and different styles into this podcast. We're kind of revamping it in the new year, and we would love your support. And we love any questions or comments that you have about the content or any requests. All right. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you next week.